We wouldn't be streaming this podcast. We wouldn't be going up on your TikTok, uploading a bunch of, videos, YouTubers, streamers. So many people can thank Dr. Paulraj for his specific contributions because it made the information, the processing, the uploading, all that, it made it faster. It made it more efficient. Signals could be transferred that people just didn't know until he came around and uncovered them. But this was after he'd already spent part of his career in the Navy for India, helping with building more capable sonar during a war. So, we have a lot of exciting things to talk about there. He discovered MIMO at the turn of the century, and that's led to a revolution in the way that we communicate. We're honored to have him on today. Today, I'm honored to welcome Dr. Arogyaswami Paulraj, a pioneering engineer and innovator whose work has revolutionized the field of wireless communication. Dr. Paulraj is best known for inventing MIMO technology, a groundbreaking advancement that forms the backbone of modern wireless technology, including Wi-Fi, 4G, and 5G. His contributions have transformed the way we communicate, making our wireless connections faster, more reliable, and more efficient. His innovations have earned him numerous prestigious awards, making him at least a 3-time national champion, including the 2014 Marconi Prize, the 2018 National Inventors Hall of Fame, and the 2023 IET Faraday Medal, cementing his legacy as one of the most influential engineers of all time. Thank you for being on today.
For your time, you did a great job. I want to wish you, I know you have a great future. Keep going at it.
Thank you for being on today.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you. That was high praise.
It's all true, right? These are all true statements. You can look them up on Google. It's unfortunate that there's not more praise of it, I think, or more, exploiting and awareness around a lot of the work that's being done, a lot of the things that individuals like you have done throughout your career. And so that's, part of the efforts that we're doing here, part of what we're putting forward. And so just for the videos alone, just for YouTube speeds alone, what do you make of the contribution? We could talk about MIMO soon and the technology itself and help people uncover how signal processing works, how network communications work. But what do you think about the ramifications of the work? How was the world before then? And was it, has it developed in the way you thought? Did you think that Facebook would be the outcome? It would be cat videos or, et cetera?
Thank you. That's a great question, but also a difficult one. But when I sort of landed in the United States in 1991, as you pointed out, I've had a long career in India, spanning certainly sonars, and I was dabbling in high-speed computing, a little bit of AI in those early days for the government. But at Stanford, I kind of switched into wireless, and I think in part motivated by the fact that I was previously visiting at Stanford. I was still a Navy guy in India. I came here as a visiting prof and discovered an algorithm, which actually is very well known now, but it's not high in applications, for using antenna arrays to find the directions of arrivals of signals. And that had a long history, but I came upon a very, very breakthrough idea called Esprit, which was very transformative. It sort of took a different direction from what everybody else was doing. So, but that sort of, that was it was a single event. I went back to India and I was back into, building labs and companies, building labs and technologies. When I came back, the idea of using antennas in wireless was kind of back of my mind. And there's a story how I stumbled on this idea. It was actually stumbled and good fortune. But what it did was pretty incredible. It turns out there is a kind of foundational theory for all communications, wireline or wireless, and it's called the Shannon theory. And that sort of says that the amount of speed you can push into a link depends on its bandwidth, which is an obvious idea, but also upon the SNR, signal to noise ratio. So even if we have a very narrow band signal, narrow bandwidth channel, let's say 1 megahertz, you can push through 10 megabit per second or 100 megabit per second if you have sufficient signal to noise ratio. And it turns out that depends, the signal noise ratio, the noise is a given. It's the nature gives it to you, you can't change that. But signal power can be changed if you can transmit more power. So in 1991 and even today, cell phones cannot transmit more than quarter watt, 240 milliwatts to be exact.
Okay.
So you didn't have the opportunity of sending more power. So the only way you can increase speeds was using more bandwidth. And bandwidth, it turns out, with no additional power, was not a great multiplier. If you wanted to get 4 times the bandwidth, you would require 4 times the speed. You require 6 times the bandwidth. And bandwidth is expensive, it's scarce, and the idea of MIMO was without any additional power, without any additional bandwidth, you can increase the speed of the link multiple times. Today it's typically 4 times, but it'll go up to 5 and 10 times in the future. And 4 times or 5 times or 6 times doesn't seem a lot, but if you ask the question saying that I have no more power and no more bandwidth, or I have no more bandwidth, how much power do I need in order to get, say, 4 times the bandwidth? Well, the answer is today maybe a megawatt. So you can't do with quarter watt that is safe. You needed hundreds of kilowatts or even a megawatt to get that speed. So MIMO made it happen without any additional power. That was a huge breakthrough. And it's also made the link more reliable. So altogether, MIMO became a very foundational technology. So 4G and 5G and Wi-Fi, as you know today, would not exist without MIMO. And so it's very, very foundational. And I also should say my role was pretty early in the process. The original idea, the patent, and I wrote a few papers in the beginning along with my group at Stanford. And there was also nice work done at the same time in Bell Labs in East Coast. But then I think my best contribution was to start 2 companies and to kind of show that we can actually build a product where this actually works. That began to change how people began to look at this new idea. And it took another 10 years before it was accepted into mobile and Wi-Fi standards. So it's for my role, and today all that I've done was initiating the whole thing. My contribution in number of papers or number of patents is probably only 0.1 or 0.2%. It's others who came in, tens of thousands of others who have built this technology and put it in the hands of billions of people.
Yeah. I mean, they brought it to scale, but you brought it to the world. You discovered it, and then they took that and scaled it up. And how was it? I mean, you said you needed either more power or more bandwidth in order to increase the speed. Maybe you can break those two down. I mean, think of this audience as almost, coming into college era, or, people. I mean, we're walking around with these cell phones. We hear about these terms every day, yet we don't really know what they mean. And so how could you get 4x the speed with MIMO without more power and more bandwidth? And then how do power and bandwidth both support faster speeds in their own way?
So it turns out that the channel theory tells you that if you have a channel, obviously a channel which is very narrow band, let's say a channel is only one hertz wide. Well, you can only send pulses of duration of 1 second once per second in order to keep within that 1 hertz bandwidth. So obviously the amount of data you can push through that narrow channel is limited. But one more idea there is, instead of sending a pulse of a simple amplitude, say amplitude of 1 volt or minus 1 volt, to correspond to say 1 plus 1 or minus 1 bit, or a 1 or 0 bit, if you're now able to send multiple levels, say instead of 1 volt, you can say quarter volt or half or 3/4 or 1, different steps, or minus quarter, minus 3/4, minus half. Then you can send more data because you have more granularity in the pulse. But when you start breaking down the pulse into different levels, it's impacted by noise can blur that and land up with detecting the wrong level. So presence of noise makes the requirements to make it reliable. You have to send more power so that these levels are well separated so noise cannot damage them. That's how power comes into the speed of the link. And the speed of the link is also based on how many pulses per second. 1 hertz bandwidth is only 1 pulse per second, they're very limited. Today in MIMO, we are now talking, in Wi-Fi and 4G and 5G, we're talking about 10 and 20 and 50 megahertz per second. So obviously you can send much, much more speed. But remember that link speed is now shared across hundreds of users who are all using the same link at the same time. So per user, we may land up with something like, say, today in 5G, you can probably get up to a gigabit per second on your phone if it's favorable, but quite often you can get 200, 300 megabit per second. Now, in order to get that, the total bulk speed on the link is gigabit per second. And that comes without MIMO. If you had only had a phone, you would not be able to send anywhere like the speeds we have today. So MIMO made it possible for us to get that high speeds because of the fact that how MIMO works is it uses antennas at the both ends of the link. And what I discovered back in 1991 was that by using antennas at both ends of the link and some kind of pre-coding, which is really some manipulation of signals at the transmit end, and post-coding at the receiving end, as long as you have, say, 4 antennas at each end, you can speed up that link by 4 times. And without additional power, the same power, the same bandwidth. Well, and how does that work? Well, what I said was that you could take, let's say you were trying to transmit 4 megabits per second, where without these multiple antennas, only 1 megabit was possible.
Yeah,
So
you go
would
one at a
always-
time, right? You just
Yeah,
go
we will only
one
send 1 megabit on
signal.
and receive 1 megabit as received. But what I pointed out was if you send 1 megabit in each of the 4 antennas and in the same frequency channel, and with 1/4 the power, because you only have the same power as for the total number of 4 antennas, you could, under things like scattering, a multipath that exists in nature, these signals will arrive at the receiving array with a different signature across the antennas. So the transmitted signature from signal 1 from the first antenna has a signature unique and different from the second antenna. So if you learn those signatures, you could now separate these signals and get back 4 independent streams, which in ideal case look exactly like the one channel stream. So without increasing power or bandwidth, you can get 4 times, because 4 times is ideal. We can get even more depending on more antennas. And but the thing is that quite often we get about 80 to 90% of this throughput. So the whole idea of MIMO is to create parallel wireless streams out of the fact that nature does the certain scattering and allows this to happen. And the key thing was multiple antennas and a fairly sophisticated encoding and decoding at both ends.
Okay, and so maybe we can talk about, discovering this scatter in nature, right? Because that's where it derived from. Well, you were doing some exercises. I think it was raining out, and all of a sudden you started to realize that there was a unique way that a single signal was scattered in multiple parts, and so that you could then capture those multiple parts of that same signal with the same amount of power, something like that, right?
Right. So let me tell you the background. So when I joined Stanford, I was not initially a faculty member. I was working as a research associate. And the expectation was at some point in time I will be join the faculty because I'd done some work earlier, actually at Stanford, on this S3 algorithm and so on and so forth. I don't think Stanford valued my work in India very much. It was all practical. So anyway, so there was that expectation. So I was then working at that time with Professor Gene Golub, a very famous mathematician, who had a project from DARPA to look at the following problem. This problem was kind of related to cyber intelligence, when the U.S. Air Force would run aircrafts over near the battlefield and try and listen to, or they call it copying, enemy radio signals coming from the ground. And it turned out that typically when the army deploys, you tend to have these combat net radios, and you can use a particular frequency. You can use that frequency. Remember, it's all always limited frequency channels. You could reuse it, say, 20 kilometers away, because very little interference, because the propagation on the ground is very poor. But when you're on an aircraft at 50,000 feet, all these signals have very low loss, and you would, in a channel, listen to multiple signals coming from different radios. So you can't figure them out. So there was already a long-standing technology of using antenna arrays, and the fact that these signals would arrive at the aircraft at different angles of arrival would be a leverage to separate them. But it turned out that this long-standing algorithm, and I mean, there were lots of PhDs and practical systems, there were some mathematical problems with it, and there was some instability in how it worked. So Professor Garliff was given the contract to look into it. He was a very famous mathematician. So I tagged with him and to work on that area, and we knew each other. And I said, let me build a little prototype to kind of verify how the algorithms work. And lo and behold, we had a 3 antenna prototype, and we had 2 radios. These are just decked hand home wireless radios those days, decked radios. And sure enough, per theory, if these radios were held about 30 degrees apart and at some distance away from this array, we could separate them. All that was right by theory. But one day it rained, and we had to pull in this little base station of 3 antennas into the foyer of this building called Duran Building. And one of the my colleagues were helping me, one of the students. They were fiddling around the radio, and somebody was holding 2 radios in the same hand, trying to reorganize the experiment. And we found suddenly that we could separate those 2 radios held in one hand. I mean, they were not 30 degrees apart or 20 degrees apart, which is the maximum possible by theory. They were 0.1 degree apart. So what was going on? So it turned out that was answered by the fact there were multi-part reflections that made it happen. And so that was not known in the world that this could be possible. But it wasn't a relevant phenomena for the Air Force project. So I knew what was going on, but I kind of dismissed it, saying that it's not relevant to the project. But a few days later, thinking about it, mulling over it, there are lots of stories on the internet, I realized that we could did some little mathematics. We could actually, instead of using two phones to transmit, you can put 2 antennas and some coding on the same phone. You could send 2 streams and get twice the data rate, and 3 and 4 and so on and so forth. From that, the patent came, and sure enough, everybody, at least at Stanford, thought this is going to be a very fundamental patent, because its leverage was astounding. That you could do. I mean, those days I was talking about 10 antennas. I was a little foolish to think that 10 antennas could get in a phone.
You're ready.
But the Stanford Office of Technology Licensing was so bullish. The first time, I think, in history, we called all the wireless companies around the world to come to Stanford to understand the technology and take a license. And we actually held a dinner for them, and then I propounded the idea. And I think I gave the idea those days of saying we can use 10 antennas in each end and use something called QAM, which is the levels I referred to as 4 QAM. 4 QAM was considered to be the state of the art. Even 8 levels were considered very difficult from other reasons. There's the 4 QAM, which is the known technology. 8 antennas, I said, we get 10 times the speed. And what happens if you didn't have MIMO? Well, you required in that example a kilowatt of power, not quarter watt, but kilowatt. That spooked people, saying that you cannot get this leverage from antennas, something is wrong. And all the companies which came by walked away saying that this is not a viable technology.
What year was this?
1992. No, 1993, I think. 92, we filed the patent. 93, it issued, at least issued in part. 94, it issued in full. But 93, we had many claims admitted. So that's the time we had this event.
So this is early wireless.
Yeah. And
These are
93,
like the
then
big
I
bulk
joined the
cell phones.
party.
Is that right?
Say again, Andre?
But at that time, did they have the big bulk cell phones that,
Yeah,
the
they were, I
huge
think,
suitcase?
yeah, there was still that brick phones, which first developed as Motorola by Marty Cooper. And there were still brickish phones, 91, 92, and they were certainly not in hands of everybody. They were still executive kind of stuff, only expensive, and the actual phone was typically, was very expensive to subscribe to.
Yeah,
And I think
cellular
at
phone.
that time, the total market in the US was something like 100,000 phones.
Wow.
And there was a prediction saying that by year 2000, which is still 10 years away, there will be 1 million phones in the United States. Well, it turned out to be 100 million.
Woo! They were off
So
by a little bit.
that went wrong very badly.
And
But to answer your question, yes, phones were very, very rare, very expensive, and they were very large. There's still people carrying this car phone that will be the lot of electronics in the back of the car, in the dicky, and so on and so forth. And yeah, so then I joined the faculty, and my first thing was to apply to DARPA for a grant, saying this here is a beautiful idea. And DARPA said it won't work and rejected my proposal. So
DARPA missed out, huh?
missed out. Well, they spent
Yeah.
hundreds of billions of dollars later working on it, but they
Oh, they
didn't.
came back around.
They came back, oh, that took some time. So
Yeah.
initially, there was a lot of skepticism everywhere. I first got my first funding from the U.S. Office of U.S. Army Research around 2000, around 1995. And then National Science Foundation began to fund me too. And then slowly I began to realize, and people say, Paul, it's best that you try and build a company and make sure it works. It's easy to talk about theory and patents and papers, but there are so many slip ups in the real world. Build something which works. That's the time people will come to your door. So I started my first company in 1998, and we built a entirely new full up cellular systems. It didn't support handovers, so it wasn't full mobility. It was low mobility or for fixed applications. It was called IOSpan Wireless. We built both the base station and the CPE. It wasn't a handset. It was a unit on the side of a wall or something you can carry in your hand, not quite a phone. Idea of
Yeah.
a smartphone didn't exist those days. So that by 2003, we had things working. We had a one small customer, but we had raised a lot of money, but we needed even more money because pushing this into the standard was a gargantuan job. So we didn't have the money to go forward. So we were acquired by Intel, and Intel then poured a lot of money into it, and they christened the technology and they called it 4G WiMAX. It's the name which was very popular those days, 4G WiMAX.
Yeah.
And Intel backed it, and they spent billions because not just for the technology, but they funded a lot of carriers around the world, in Japan and in Korea and the United States. I think the United States is called Clearwire, to saying here is a technology which can give you true data. It's only those days phone meant only voice, but you can do data. And here's the technology. And why don't you build? Those days it was AT&T, and there was probably Southwestern Bell and a few phone carriers. But they recommended building a completely new carrier system, a new base stations, and so that's what Intel funded. But WiMAX went to about 30 million subs all over the world, mainly actually in Asia and some in the United States. But what really happened was two events which sort of knocked WiMAX out, because in 2007 the iPhone came.
Yeah.
An iPhone would give email access and do small things with the 3G connectivity. So, and therefore the cellular carriers who did only voice began to realize they could play in data too. So they then realized that WiMAX was the right technology. It's MIMO stuff. So they began to look into it, and by 2008, they adopted it and they called it 4G LTE. And that's how 4G LTE, as we know it, took off. And at that point, it became mainstream. And Wi-Fi also had never used MIMO before, also realized this is the way to go. So by 2008, 2009, the entire world shifted to MIMO. And there's a modulation technique called OFDM. It's very well known earlier, but not used in wireless. And once you start using MIMO in high speed, OFDM was a good modulation technique. So MIMO OFDM became the bedrock of all wireless. Today, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi is MIMO OFDM. So it took, as I often say, 14 years from an initial small experiment and an aha idea to the time it became global. And I believe almost every such idea takes time. So, if anything, my mistake was to be a little impatient. These things take time.
You're
But
young and ambitious.
I
Yeah.
wasn't young, but I was ambitious.
Ah, you were young. I guess young is relative, huh? And so you really are responsible for killing BlackBerry.
Killing what?
Killing BlackBerry.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
BlackBerry
that I
was doing
saw
a
that
good job.
movie, and it's
Good, good
you're
job.
the one.
Good job. And I think BlackBerry also probably, it's a great, great company, but I think there were some business decisions also made in BlackBerry, which, but I got a feeling what really killed BlackBerry was iPhone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny because I was watching that movie. It's a great indie film, BlackBerry,
Very
and
nice.
they talk about that. They talk about how they switched over to data, and there was the big shocker for them that they weren't selling minutes; they were going to sell data, and it's really because of MIMO that they could afford to have so much data, not just voice data, that they could transmit between people because they had a much more capacity to send information.
And the nice thing about BlackBerry is, you know, uh, Canada is not known for building iconic companies in telecom, but they did it. And this little, bunch of two, three people made something absolutely amazing. And of course, Canada also had Nortel, which is a very iconic company. But Nortel, I think, in the 2001, uh, there was a big internet bust, and they sort of went down at that time.
Hmm.
But BlackBerry was an amazing team, and in some sense, they laid the foundation for iPhone, and iPhone certainly transformed lives.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so, I guess taking it way back, I'd like to go back to the 170B project and the I think it's APSO. Is that right? The APSO project?
Yeah, I can clarify that. So just to go back on my background, I joined the Indian Navy at the age of 16.
It's pretty young, isn't it?
Pretty young. Yeah, that was typically admission for the academy. I spent 3 years. It was joint Army Navy Air Force Academy. I was a very, very, very strong student. So I was really the wrong place for me was to get into the armed forces, but various reasons I joined, and of course I did. I always topped my classes, and then I opted for the Navy, and in the Navy there's a branch in the Navy which would do the which would job was to maintain the electronics on warships. I became a part of that. Did some training. It wasn't really a proper engineering train like what we understand as BTech or BE. I did some training, and then but since I was known in the Navy as someone who was very oriented to math and research, I had the good fortune of being sent to IIT Delhi, which is one of India's top engineering universities,
Mm.
for 2 years to do a master's. But there I caught the eye of my professor, who kind of pushed the Navy to let me do a PhD. And the Navy was not very keen because they said, we don't need scientists. I agree with the Navy. But finally, they said, okay, you want to do a PhD? You have 2 years to do a master's. You can do whatever you want. Switch to a PhD. And that I then at that point got in touch with somebody at Stanford called Tom Kala, who came visiting there. And I got latched on to doing some very theoretical and turned out very foundational work in signal analysis and signal estimation theory. and it required very, very advanced mathematics, something called ETO calculus. So I did a very nice thesis. I thought groundbreaking thesis, but I was back in the Navy 2 years later, and and I would have been a regular Navy guy, driving ships or maintaining radars and sonar.
Even after all of that, they still want to make you a regular Navy guy. You
Well, the
got
Navy
this
didn't
crazy
understand
thesis.
what I was doing, and the Navy is a fighting force, and there's no room in Navy for scientists. So,
That's
which
that. Yeah.
I kind of agree with, but
Hmm.
my break came because in 1991 there was unfortunately a war between India
71, right?
and 71 Pakistan, and this was linked to the formation of Bangladesh, and India was under a lot of stress because of the lots of there were lots of refugees coming out of Bangladesh because of the massacre going on there. So we finally intervened, and there was this war, and famously, United States sided with Pakistan. So there were some problems with U.S. at that time between India and the United States. But in that war, on December 7th, I know the date, we launched a frontline warship called INS Kukri, which had just been sent out to hunt for a Pakistani submarine, which is actually a French origin submarine, a Daphne class, and try and catch it and sink it. And our ship, Kukri, was a British Blackwood class anti submarine frigate. It turned out the hunter became the victim, and we lost the ship with almost 200 lives. And the Navy knew that our sonar couldn't detect it. It was actually a British sonar. So I was flown to Bombay. I was a pure mathematician at the time to look at that, since can you do something about it? And I said, I'll take it on. And then that was a small project. It took about a year and a half, and we redesigned the electronics of that British sonar, transmit and receive electronics. And that was
Hmm.
designed 20 years ago when it was still probably valve technology. So in 1991, 71, we had some integrated circuits, a small scale. So we did a much more sophisticated electronics, and it dramatically improved that little sonar. So that gave me some credentials, and it went into production. I spent a year in the UK on a break at the university, and I came back and lobbied the government saying that let's do our own major sonar. We were looking for a major frontline sonar for us because now we wanted to make sure we had a really top sonar for the future. I said we will do it on our own, and finally it prevailed. And that led to the APSO project. That took 6 years. It was a very, very advanced sonar. Certainly, in my opinion, way ahead of anything we saw in Europe or in Soviet Union. We knew the Soviet Union well because we were buying a lot of equipment from them. And we didn't have good comparison with the United States, but it was a very good sonar.
Hmm.
And so after that was over, the government gave me a break, and I was offered a scholarship anywhere in the world, and at government expense, and I landed at Stanford for a couple of years.
Not a bad place to go.
That led to this Esprit algorithm, which is now very well known. I think 25,000 papers. But that sort of got me interested in antennas and wireless, but it has nothing to do with MIMO. I went
Yeah.
back to India, but 91 when I came back, it led to MIMO. So all these
So
background, I think at some level of layering, which led to MIMO, I got to think about it more.
I mean, taking us back to December 7th, 71. 200 people are killed. Some of them you know some of these people, and they come to you and they say, we need the sonar didn't work. We need. I mean, what was that pressure like? What
Yeah,
was that moment like for
it
you
was,
emotionally?
yeah, in fact, this ship sank, I think, at 10 p.m. next morning, 6 a.m. I was in Delhi working at the naval headquarters. The Navy, in his generosity, kept me in Delhi because I hadn't submitted my thesis as yet. So I wanted to stay on, hang around IIT Delhi so that I could go to the library at evenings and all that. So I was working in naval headquarters. The next morning I was flown to Bombay. But at that time, I mean, throughout my record in the military, I was always, always the academic name in the Navy and the armed forces. I was very well known. So they said, no, the sonar didn't work. Maybe Paul can do something about it. So that's how I got involved. And frankly, I didn't know anything about sonars, but I had the technical background to dig into it. So I was very motivated to making something happen. But that particular war ended up within the next 2 weeks or so. So the war was over, but nevertheless, I started this project. I actually did it at IIT Delhi, a bit self-serving because I could also finish my very theoretical thesis easily. And and we invented a lot of new ideas to improve that sonar. And true enough, in June this year, when I went to receive the Prince Philip Medal from UK, Princess Anne gave it to me, and she was kind of chiding me a little bit, saying that you guys beat us because that technology we built for the British sonar clearly outperformed the British design. So I think she was joking, but it certainly was a big jump in. I think we more than doubled or tripled the range,
Wow.
thanks to some fancy algorithm, but also fact we had integrated circuits.
I mean, back then, people couldn't just instantaneously share their presence to hundreds of people, millions of people in the world. We couldn't just talk to each other like you and I are talking to each other. The pathways of communication were enhanced by you, in part by you, and the discoveries that you made. Yet there's still these conflicts. There's still these wars. The opening of the channels of communication of everyday people hasn't lifted us out of that framework. Is that something you thought might have changed? I mean, you spent a lot of time around war and around military conflicts. You know how governments think. You have a particular view, perhaps, of people and human nature. How is it that the explosion of of these technologies and giving them to even ordinary citizens can talk to each other across the planet in a second didn't lead to more peace? We're still seeing these wars.
Let me begin by saying that it is so distressing that there's so much violence in the world, and every time I get a minute, I pray that the world will become more peaceful. There's just so much suffering. And having said that, I do believe, and I want to put the blame not on myself, but on windsurf for inventing the internet. So the internet has really enabled communications. I should say that 70% of internet traffic comes through, unfortunately, through MIMO-enabled technology to wireless.
Yes.
So I'm to blame too. But I think the internet has both brought enormous benefits, but it's also, I think, brought this idea of polarization, because of, I think, natural human instinct to form groups, and groups don't talk to each other. So it has certainly increased the divisiveness and the exploitation of human nature by interested bodies. So you're very right. Communications have been a mixed blessing, but it's also brought so much of good. I mean, there's so much progress today in healthcare and in travel, entertainment. So, I think it's human beings are capable of great good, but also great evil. So we have to rise above our nature and look for the best spirit, go after our best spirits. So I agree with you that there is an issue here, but I think the technology is not to blame. It's really, I think, human spirits, and even I do believe the government can only do so much. It's really each individual person has to question himself, saying, "Are we helping this world or hurting it?" And we really have to stand up and do something, not only for ourselves, but certainly for our children, and at my age, also for my grandchildren. So it is a distressing time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, certainly. I mean, a lot of pros, a lot of cons. Hopefully, I think perhaps en masse, it'll show that this is still the best time ever to be alive, and that these technologies have strengthened world peace, have strengthened at least individuals' ability to grab onto information that can help them make those decisions that you're talking about. Can also take them down rabbit holes that will lead them to want to, perhaps harm society. But I mean, getting back to the war technologies and the fact that you're going to India soon to do some more work with the government, how have these technologies? I want to start particularly with sonar. Have you seen its development now? I mean, we talked about the Queen saying that you outdid the British by updating their ships that they gave you all with far better sonar. Where is sonar and other similar detection capabilities today?
Yeah, I have to answer the question in somewhat in saying I don't know, because for some reason, and I think for good reason, sonars are always very hush hush. Uh, the Because uh, uh, in particularly in Cold War, and even today, nuclear tipped missiles in submarines are always the ever present danger, for which there are not very good defenses. So sonar technology, which can detect submarines, is always kept under wraps. So I've once I walked away from the project in 2003 and 1983 when I came to Stanford. Once that system was declared as the technology accepted and went into production, I kept away from sonars. So I have very little idea of what's going on. I mean, a little bit, but not much. So to answer your question, I'm sure there's been a lot of progress. India itself, we were, of course, importing sonars till that time, but once we built that very advanced system, NAPSO, we never went back to any imports. We became self-sufficient, I think, for a long time, and even forever. So that was certainly good for India, but the world has not kept quiet. There's been lots of advances. I don't track them because there's so little information available.
That makes sense. Yeah, that
I
makes sense.
only sort of always look back. I mean, I've certainly looked at whether MIMO can help sonars, and it can, but when it's actually being used, I'm not aware. I didn't work on it myself, but I'm sure it's being used. But it's very very classified.
For sure. Speaking of the awards that you've won, hey, do you have any with you?
Uh, I would. Yeah, they're probably hidden somewhere. But let me pull one out for you. Can I pull up? Can I stand up and do it?
Yeah. Do your thing.
I think they're scattered all over the place. But let me show you two, which just happen to be on my desk.
Oh, that's great.
So,
We're excited.
and so this is the Faraday Medal.
Oh,
So by the way, this is from the Institution of Engineering and Technology in UK. UK's institution which covers all engineering and technology for the country, and it's actually worldwide. They have a presence in the US, but big in India, where I'm actually giving a keynote next week.
can you lift it closer to the camera?
Yeah, closer to the camera.
Yeah, up and up. Yeah, try up there, around there,
There you are.
and then keep going forward. Keep on. Let's see if we can read it.
That's the Faraday Medal, and this is the citation. Let me see.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll focus it, but it looks great.
By the way, it's a bronze medal.
Okay.
I think it's not showing up too well.
Oh yeah, no, it looks good though. We're happy to see it.
Yeah,
That
I
looks
would
great.
actually, I can send you some pictures that you can probably frame in. And this one, National Inventors Hall of Fame, US Patent Office Hall of Fame. And this has got two iconic faces on it. And you can guess one is Abraham Lincoln
Let's see Lincoln. Is that Edison?
and others Edison. Edison
Ah,
obviously face belongs there, but how come Lincoln is there on a patent office award? Well, he's the only president who has a patent, by the way.
really?
Yeah, going back, he was, as you know, had roots in farming. I think his father had a small farm, used to help out. And so he had a patent on something like water management or something like that. So that was the obverse of the medal. I will send you a proper picture of that later.
Oh, thank
So
you.
yeah, the fun thing about the Philip medal was when I got it from Princess Anne, my medal wasn't ready. So they gave me the medal, which is actually displayed in the Prince Philip House, which is where the Royal Academy is housed. And they gave the medal of Sir Frank Whittle, who was the first Philip medalist, and he was the inventor of the jet engine, Sir Frank Whittle. So I got Whittle's medal, and promptly taken away from me. And my own medal is ready now, but I have to pick it up at some point in time.
You have to go back and get it. I
Yeah,
mean,
the
what are these different awards and their institutions? I mean, what do they mean for engineers in general? I know they're, scientists, engineers, they're typically low key people. They're not looking for the limelight. They're not doing it for awards necessarily. Do you think they motivate some people, or do they mean a lot to people? How do we frame those in the greater culture right now?
Yeah, two thoughts. One I would say is that I always point out that I mean all these awards were for MIMO, and I did get one award for APSO, a sonar in India from the Indian president, and there wasn't a medal; it was a brochure. It was a scroll. But to go back to my thoughts, I always say that getting such a pervasive technology, it's now in 20 billion devices around the world, 6 billion of humans, and then all these other devices, and all the infrastructure. It's taken a lot of people. So I always say that this award is not for me, but for everybody else, but it includes everybody else who made this possible. So I was only the original guy, the first in that process, but so these awards for the area and for the people who made it workable. My first thought. My second thought is that almost everything we touch today, which gives us a quality of life, whether it's in medicine, with transportation, in entertainment, safety, everything was invented by somebody. Somebody has invented it. So it's really inventions and entrepreneurs, and quite often with support of the government in many cases, and often also, as you pointed out, pretty lonely journeys because not every invention comes to fore. And there are many disappointments in life around such ventures or such endeavors. But thanks to them, the world becomes a better place. Certainly in terms of human comfort, health, and safety. And today we live a life with opportunities and exposure. It's far beyond even the emperor of emperors 1,000 years ago. I mean, nobody could have this comfort, even if you ruled the entire world. So technology has played a huge role, whether it's whether it's in electronics or it's in bio or, or anything else. So, and therefore, we need to keep this train running. There's a lot more to be done. Enormous progress is possible in future. So we need to encourage people, young people, to see the opportunity of inventing new things and making the world a better world. I think many people can give back we all have to give back to life. I always say the most important way of giving back to life is to work for society, and certainly social uplift, in my opinion, is the most important level of work. But close to that is also innovating ideas which help this world, and therefore I think engineering and certainly invention, entrepreneurship is a worthy cause, and we need talented people to come in, and there's a lot of talent around to do this. It quite often it may not be the most best paying way of making or the most easiest way to wealth, but it's certainly a very fulfilling life, and the esteem that you have from your colleagues and others is also a great compensation. So I would certainly see a life in engineering, particularly for innovation and also teaching and entrepreneurship. Stanford does that very well, where you combine research and entrepreneurship. These are really uh, very magical, been a big part of our tradition in our country, in the United States. So there's some good things are happening. Let us keep it going.
Yeah, I agree. So speaking to a young engineer, speaking about uh, on one hand, you have, you know, a way to make wealth. I mean, you sold the company. The company sold. It was a great way out. You had an exit that was probably a very lucrative day. And then you also have, you know, like you said, the esteem of your colleagues. Now, this is just for high level, quick grab, right? So if you could have, looking out today, you've been one of the founding fathers of Wi-Fi, 4G, 5G. Looking out today, if you could pick a technology that you thought would be the next $1 million idea that a 25-year-old could look into to getting into, what would you suggest for them? Yeah. That's exciting. I mean, the future is looking very exciting. And like you said, get a foundation. I mean, I love the story of the detection of MIMO and the origins because it literally was because the student had two of the radios in one hand and you could decipher the difference. I mean, people wouldn't be able to realize that that meant anything, right? Like it was only because you had so much prior knowledge that you were able to say, "Oh my gosh, that's a breakthrough. That actually it means something." And then even beyond that, you took it back to I think it was the DARPA program head, and they're like, "This is not useful for our application." Right? I mean, I know DARPA rejected it after you put it together, but the original work that you were doing that came out of even that person said this has no military application. DARPA said, no, we can't do anything with this. You brought all these people into Stanford, all the wireless communications with their block phones in the early 90s that could have got on this early, missed the boat. And it was because the student had two radios in their hand and you could decipher the difference. You can't have a breakthrough like that happen with someone who doesn't have a tremendous wealth of knowledge coming into it. And then the lights turn on and now you have something that has forever changed humanity. I mean, I have this poster here of the history of humanity, science, and technology. I don't know if MIMO's on there. It should be, and it will be in the future versions because, I mean, the immense penetration and reach of the technology is really almost absurd. It's really remarkable.
Right. There was one fun story there about that the Stanford event was, I mean, all these people who came, I think they came from around the world. They were probably vice presidents or some kind of legal status in the companies, but they had booked their flights to go back next morning, I think, and so naturally took the flight back. But one guy canceled his flight and stayed on. That was the vice president from Motorola. He thought we should dig into it a little bit more. But next day he also left.
He digged enough, huh? And got what he needed out of it.
And I think I partly, the point was in 1992, I was a complete unknown name in wireless in this country. Nobody had not written a single paper. I was known for that algorithm called Esprit. It had nothing to do with communications. It was more a sensing technology. It's very well known, but it is not something that the wireless guys knew anything about. So I was, and I had come from a very unusual background in India. So I think it was, and then the claim saying what I'm getting a leverage of 1,000 or 10,000 in power put together just didn't seem right.
And so
I tell you, I would have done the same thing myself. I would have walked away.
you would have walked away too. Yeah, just based on where it was at. One thing we want to do here is showcase individuals like yourself, bring them to the light so that people understand the people the pioneers, and we want to help people understand almost like sports in the way that people understand the great. They'll compare the greatest athletes, or they compare the greatest football players or whatever, cricket players. They'll vary, right? And I'm curious, in your mind, who are some of the greatest technologists, inventors, scientists in your field, basically? I know you mentioned some people who were instrumental, some people who had some theories that helped you along the way, but who are some of those greats in your mind? And then what makes a great engineer? So firstly, who are the greats and what makes it great?
Right. That's going to be a very, very tall, very broad question. But let me go back to people who are not living today.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like, I always, by the way, also say that uh, innovation is a great thing, but to convert innovation to an actual product is a long way. And the key for that is perseverance. So perseverance is very, very important because you can be sure the bigger the idea, the more opposition it will face. It always happens because a big idea tends to change the landscape, and there's always a tendency of the status quo to reject that because it's not in their favor to change things. So perseverance is very important, and in fact, sometimes the ideas may almost seem foolish. I think, for example, when the helicopter was invented, there were probably two or three people, but every one of them was considered to be a total idiot. But finally, they did make it work. So perseverance is very important. And having said that, uh, I certainly think we all look up to Edison, who certainly brought some very good technologies to us. Certainly, the incandescent lamp was so transformative. So Edison, I would really hold up there, uh, and Tesla too, who had who was an enormously powerful innovator. The induction motor that we use now sometimes propels our electric cars. Many things came from him. Again, the man with both brilliance and perseverance. Uh, and beyond that, uh, going back to England, England has produced so many incredible people. One person I admire greatly in England is the first Faraday medalist. I was the 100th medalist, by the way.
Oh,
First
congratulations. 100
medalist,
years of Faraday medals.
right, right. And the first medalist was Oliver Heaviside. He was a incredible scientist, bit of a recluse, but he's the person who uh, who invented uh, the telegraph equation. And here's a fun story. When the telegraph was first developed, this particularly the big challenge was transatlantic communications. Those days, the only way you can get a message across was use a ship. A ship was easily 6 or 7 day journey, so it's 7 days to get some message across. And the idea of a telegraph line running across the ocean, under the ocean, was very attractive. And so the first telegraph lines were laid in the early part of the 19th century. But the way it worked was because the way the capacitance of these lines, you would send a the way you send this dots and dashes, right? Dot and
Mm-hmm.
dash. You send a dot or a dash. You normally send it at maybe 1,000 volts, 1,000 volt dot. It may only last for a few milliseconds. That goes down the line. It starts spreading out because of the capacitance in the line. And by the time it reaches New York, it would become few minutes long and very, very faint. So the thin line pulse becomes a long, long pulse. So in order to send one sentence, it took you something like uh, probably 1 hour. But
Wow.
yet it was a huge breakthrough because it is much better than 6 days. And
Wow. They were excited about that 1 hour
and
sentence.
the very first message came from Queen Victoria to our president. I forget who it was. The first inaugural message. It took an entire day, one paragraph. Now, Oliver Heaviside discovered that there's a way of speeding it up by about exactly what I was talking about, 4 to 5 times, by using loading coils. And he's well known for that. He's also there's a very, very great mathematician and enormous genius, Maxwell. Maxwell's laws of electromagnetism is the foundation for lots of things. And but his equations were somewhat inscrutable, 2 or 3 pages long. And Oliver Heaviside gave us the four classic equations to condense that into an approachable way. Many innovations. So Oliver Heaviside, the first Faraday medalist, and I'm very proud to be the 100th Faraday medalist. And we did both similar things. I speeded up wireless, he speeded up wireline communications.
That's they tied a bow on that somehow. 100 years of that too. I mean, and back to those. I mean, do you feel like these medals and these awards are sought after, are really appreciated by people who are practicing scientists, engineers? I know people aspire to get the Nobel Prize, and obviously part of our job is to bring at the national champions is to bring these other awards to the limelight more and to give them more because there's so many great people, so many great contributions. I think there's a whole gold mine here of interest in these people and celebration that could be taking place, yet it doesn't even make the top of the news feed any day of the week. Maybe the Oscars is a little, I mean, sorry, the Nobel Prize is a little blip on the radar when it comes to science awards.
Yeah, I agree. I think, but Nobel Prize by construction or design is not given to engineers. So almost anything you touch which has changed your life, jet travel, the internet, or wireless, or the automobile, anything you touch which makes your life better, didn't get a Nobel Prize. So that's the so Nobel Prize is given for. I mean, it's also given for economics and peace, but in sciences for more foundational sciences, physics, chemistry, and so on and so forth. So, but there are, increasing awareness to honor engineers, and there is something called the Turing Award, and so it is given for people who contribute to computer science. And the name Vince Cerf that you know, and I actually met him at dinner 3 or 4 days ago. I mean, such an incredible person, the father of the internet. He and Bob Kahn, who changed. I mean, their impact in the world is enormous, and I mean they don't get a Nobel Prize. So I think I'm glad you're doing this. That but there are other prizes. I think there's called the Marconi Prize, which I got, which tends to
Yeah.
honor people in communications. So I think Nobel Prizes leave out the whole area of engineering innovations, which actually finally deliver the changes society gets. So I'm glad you're doing this. It's an important message.
Now, when you came to America, the United States, you mentioned that they were the top place for PhDs. There was a brain drain in India back then where you have great undergrads and then they go out, become PhDs. There were other characteristics. I mean, you did have the beef with the United States when they chose Pakistan in the war in '71. Um, I mean, you're a citizen now. I'm a citizen as well. What do we make of the United States and its stature in the 21st century? Is it still the city on the hill? Does it still have those characteristics? And if not, how do we hone in on those things and bring about the best of the nation?
Right. I think the big strength of the United States is that there is, in terms of innovation in science and technology and taking that to the market is very important because unless you commercialize it and billions of people use it, the impact comes from that huge market impact of people changing lives. No country in the world comes close to us. So we are doing a great job. And it was, if you go back 100 years, it was not the United States, it was Germany, and to some extent in Europe, which led the way, but we began to lead it. And we done a whole lot of work there. So that's the admirable part of the United States. And we have a constitution which at the core is inclusive, pluralistic, and democratic constitution. Like all countries, we have our faults, but I do think the trend line in the United States is to become a better country, to become, rise to better angels, and to become more unified and a bigger force for the good for the world. We also have enormous power, military power, and I also would say power of influence, cultural power in the world, and we should be careful to use it to promote peace and in the world. And sometimes it's sometimes when somebody's at the top, it's very difficult to tolerate any competition. So some of that dynamics is going on. But I do believe I know India well, particularly well. I know a little bit about China, know Europe. I've lived there for some time. There is the world is best served when it's with both democracy within the world and is also uh, a shared ethics and a shared uh, views of a global society where everybody helps each other. And so United States, I think sometimes our overwhelming power sometimes gives us outsized influence, which may not always work to our benefit or the world's benefit. So we have to be careful. But I do believe the power we have can be used for great good, not only outside the country but also within. We still have many uh, many segments of society who need to be lifted up. We need a more inclusive society. A lot of people need to catch up on education. Uh, Too many people are working very hard to make even a basic living. So we need a fairer society. So we have our faults, but I do think at the core of the American people, we want to fix those things. So I pray that happens.
You mentioned prayer. I'm
Prayer.
curious. Yeah, yeah, prayer. Yes. I'm curious. Are you religious at all?
Yes, I grew up in India, and so I come from a community where I myself grew up in a Catholic family, Roman Catholics, and my wife also. But I think on my side we were fairly recent converts. So I have lots of uncles and aunts who are Hindus, and some of my relations have married into other religions and communities. India is also different ethnic communities. So we belong to the south. So my son-in-law is from the north, and he's a Hindu, or maybe he has no religion. So we're very intermixed. But me and my wife do go to church, and I see my main focus with the church is I see it as standing for the poor, and I look at Christianity as a force for helping the poor. So that's where my religion comes from, and so, so helping the poor and more justice for people is what drives me, and the church embodies many of those aspirations.
If you could have any, I mean, you have a bunch of patents. If you could bring any of them to the forefront and make them
I
a,
think the MIMO patent certainly stands way above everything else in terms of its influence.
yes.
Uh, I would say that there was a patent on Esprit. Esprit, it's difficult to explain on a web video, but it's a very beautiful piece of mathematics. And it was, by the time I came up with the idea, there were hundreds of PhD theses looking at that particular problem. And this was a completely different approach. It was, somebody said the next best thing to bread and butter. So I was very proud of that, and that brings up a little thought I also wanted to convey to you, and that
Hmm.
was it. When I landed at Stanford, I just got up this very large sonar project, and I was much more a manager. At least toward the end of the project, running hundreds of people. But there was some experimental work I did originally in the design of the sonar, which was stuck in my mind. So when I was working at Stanford, I was back at academia. It's purely theoretical work, nothing to do with any practice. But that theoretical question was lingering in my mind, and we were looking at somewhat similar problems, but in a more complex scenario. So when we had multiple signals, and it turned out that that approach I had in when I was doing the APSO finally gave me the mathematical basis to break this problem, and that led to a very new idea. And I remember in '91 when I came back for some business meeting in Canada, I went to a conference, just by the way, in Toronto, and there were 7 parallel sessions on history. So it has taken over the theoretical world. But the point I wanted to make was I knew there was the original idea out of APSO had some legs in this new problem, but I couldn't figure it out. I was holding it in my mind for many, many months. We were going to sleep, we were having a shower, and one day at 2 o'clock in the morning it broke. And it was such a simple idea, but I had held it in my mind months. So that is something also about the breakthrough ideas, that your brain works on it on the background, and you come back to it again and again, and ultimately it doesn't come aha in front of you. It comes from out of nowhere because there is some silent process in the brain.
Yeah. The eureka moment, right? The
In
aha.
MIMO, it was different. It was nature telling you, guy, listen to this, something is different here. And that led to the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And nature breaks that signal down. Is that right? Like you said,
No,
nature.
nature said that if signals were, were arriving at more than less than 20 degrees apart in that scenario could not be separated. That's mathematics, that's nature, that is experiment. And here you were in a slightly, we had brought the stuff into kind of cozy indoor in the foyer, and uh, and uh, and as somebody was holding two phones in one hand, so they were probably separated by zero point 0.1 of a degree. I mean, there was no separation angle. I mean, zero, almost zero separation, and we could still separate it. So what is happening was, in the original case, when signals were coming, they came as planar wavefronts, and that they come in like this, planar wavefronts, and it turns out when they get too close, the underlying mathematics breaks down and it's not separable. But when you had these together and you had this all the scattering, even though signals came from almost the same point, because of the scattering, they arrive at this array with very different signatures because of the scattering. And that gave you the leverage. And that was the aha moment.
That's fantastic. So, I mean, do you have, this has been just fantastic. We're just, I mean, comfortably getting into like an hour and a half. I'm not sure how your time is looking. I don't make sure I'm cognizant, but yeah, we've been flying by. It's been pretty fantastic. What given this platform, I guess, what would you say to, or what do you say? I mean, to young engineers getting their stuff going, and
Sure.
yeah, what kind of advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I would, one thing I would say is that in general, I mean, I sort of know other countries, our youngsters, and I include my own grandchildren, are not very STEM oriented. So they sort of look at mathematics. I remember my granddaughter was visiting from London and she's telling me she hates computer science. She's only 10 years old. So they tend to be uh, taken up with multimedia and, with sports and maybe YouTubers like you. They see those things as important and they look at STEM, and so it's very boring. But it's not true in other countries, in India, in China, and even I say in many parts of Europe. STEM has a much more traction among youngsters. But the value of STEM is that much of the high paying jobs is there. Certainly, you could become a very wealthy person by being a huge baseball player or a football player or a great actor, but only one in 10 million, one in a million make that. In engineering, of course, some people become very wealthy, I'm like Elon Musk and others, but many engineers who work well at it do well in life, and more than financially, but also it's a rewarding life because you often come up with ideas which become practical, which changes other people's lives. So it is a very fulfilling life. It does take work because it does take mathematics. It does take perseverance. Uh, and I always say that it's once you start loving a subject, you'll become good at it. So the key to is love something. Even math, I don't think when I was young I knew much about mathematics. I loved it, but somehow I got some breakthrough. I became good at it, and then I began to love it more, and that steamrolled until I became really good at it, and that helped me. And once you become good at something, it's no more work. So for me, all whatever I had done was love of my life, and so it became, it's no work at all. In fact, my problem is I overwork. So I can only assure young people that this is a good living, a good way of contributing to society, and also a good way to help Mother Earth. The Earth, as you know, our Earth which live on is a tiny speck in this vast, vast universe. Some people say We may be the only sentient beings in this huge universe. This is worth preserving. And in some sense, no doubt, philosophy and higher thinking is and politics is important here, but technology is a very key to preserving this earth and lifting everybody's life. It's, the people are rich, that's good for them, but there are lots of poor people in the world, so we need to help them. So STEM is the way to do it. So get into it. I assure you, you will never look back.
That's beautiful. Are there books that you recommend for people that you think everybody should read?
I would let me send you a couple of things, and you can add it in as a page on your thing.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Well, I think that's a great spot. I mean, that was beautifully said, and I agree. We got to look out after the poor, and getting into STEM is a way there. Like you said, humanity living on this speck, this little blue dot, this pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan, one of my heroes, once said, in this vast universe. And because of your contributions, that pale blue dot now has faster and better connectivity. We can transfer data. These sentient beings, these perhaps the only ones in the entire cosmos, can now move into this era of passing this information and speaking to each other, and perhaps becoming more and more human. And so, thanks again for your long career, your patient career, 14 years after its discovery, bringing this to the forefront. And then thank you for taking out the time to come and talk to us on National Champion Radio.
Thank you, Andrea. I thought, thank you for your time. You did a great job. I want to wish you, I know you have a great future. Keep going at it. And I tell you, bringing the life of STEM people to young people, to our younger youth of our country is a great service. Keep going.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.